Okay, so hi Danielle. Thank you for being here today. I am I'm Aria, an artist here at Contra Common, and I'm joined today by Danielle East. Her solo show is on display in our gallery right now, of which we will be talking today. So, to give a little intro on Danielle, Danielle Demetra East is a West Texas based artist working with found objects and mixed media assemblage. Danielle is originally from LaGrange, Texas, and lived the majority of her life around her family, particularly her grandmother, and in the rural areas of Fayette County, Texas. Recently, she was a graduate of the University of Mary Hardin Baylor with a degree in studio arts, where she received the Austin Burks Award. Currently, she's an artist in residence at the Charles Adams Studio Project, where she is exploring Afrofuturism, Black Girl Magic, and African American Vernacular English. She recently spoke in Texas Tech's School of the Arts speaker series on race and social justice in the arts. She has work at the Museum of African American History in Lubbock, as well as here at Contra Common in Bee Cave. She also founded the East Lubbock Art House to support emerging artists and marginalized artists of color. Danielle East's exhibition, Transfiguration of a Black Girl's Magic, is currently showing in our gallery, and it'll be on view through this Sunday, October 18th. And that is where I'm standing right now. So to start up some questions, you are currently an artist in residence at the Charles Adams Studio Project, aka CASP, in Lubbock, and you are in a show there called WikiHow: How to Run for President. What have you taken away from the experience of your residency?
So I've been a resident for about, I guess it's a little over a year, and so I'll do it for 2 years. So it's been a really good space. I live I'm neighbors with 3 other artists there, and we started working on this block party idea that we're hosting a Saturday too. So it's been kind of really big learning experience, and it's also been a really good way to connect with other artists too. So with the show, the WikiHow: How to Run for President, it's I think it's 12 women artists that have work up, and we did everything to respond to the upcoming election. And it was just really nice to we all kind of help hang the show, put the work together, and promote the show. So it's just a really good way to connect with the arts community.
Nice. Yeah, and obviously you're connecting with the arts community in a lot of ways. You founded the East Lubbock Art House in February of this year with the mission of making art accessible and to uplift East Lubbock in the process. How did this come about? How did this idea
come? So I just kind of I've always wanted to start an art gallery, work in an art gallery. So I was just I think it's time to do that. And I was just kind of I saw a lot of other art spaces and art galleries really weren't inclusive. So I was just we should make something really inclusive. And I looked at spaces in downtown Lubbock and East Lubbock. And at first we really couldn't find anything. And then later on, we finally found a space, but it was just really I guess we were invested on engaging with the arts community and engaging with artists in Texas, throughout Texas, and just uplifting East Lubbock. So it was just kind of that idea of connecting the arts with activism.
Yeah, that's great. This show, Transfiguration of a Black Girl's Magic, was scheduled for March originally, but was delayed when COVID hit the US. Contra Common had to reschedule till we could open our gallery doors again safely. During this interim period, while the show was delayed, nationwide protests and collective organization by Black activists have pulled into focus the dire need for Black liberation and racial justice. The work you've created is always super necessary, and we all need to see it even doubly so right now. Can you talk about how you think this body of work has transformed over the course of this year?
Yeah, so I think my work, for a while, I stopped making work, I took a break. And so I've been more invested on making work that kind of like doesn't really speak to so much to like our pain and injustice. Like I feel like a lot of people like that's what they want to hear Black artists talk about and other artists of color. So I've kind of been like more focused on like, you know, what is happiness, like what is healing, and you know, just our identities. So not so much about like what's going on in society, but just kind of like what's going on in my world and what's going on in like other women's world too. So it's just like something that I want to talk about because I feel like a lot of times I would make work that more or less responds to like what society wants to see.
Yeah, and then in the gallery, you have a mixture of visual and literary work. You can see there's poetry on the walls here, and of course you have poetry in some zines. How do you view the relationship between the text and images you're working with in the show? Do you think about the poetry and the visual works as separate entities or one full installation to be viewed together?
Um, I usually think of them as kind of like intertwined. Like usually I'll like I might write poetry and then I'll make a piece that kind of responds to it. So I usually try and like work on the poem or the poetry and then incorporate it into the work. So it's I don't really see them as separate. I see them as kind of like just two, like they might be two different mediums, but they kind of like explore the same idea differently, just through different ideas. But I've always been like writing poetry, and I feel like now I've kind of like started writing more poetry than making like three-dimensional work. So I guess it's just kind of like depending on like the time and what's going on, like that's how I kind of respond to things.
Yeah, I think, I mean, personally, I think it's like really seamless having the like hanging works and the poetry together. It's like one big just installation in itself. Um,
Yeah.
so, yeah, in such pieces as the hanging poetry, the viewer is prompted to read in the voice of several different listed women, like Tanisha Anderson, Gay Robertson, etc. As in, you know, this one, How to Communicate with the Spirits of Your Sisters, read by Evelyn East. These women who have all, quote, been killed by paid public servants. Are you delivering on, what are you delivering on by prompting the reader to speak in the words in the voice of these women?
Yeah, so I did a previous show with some of the poetry that's up on the wall, and I had recordings. Like I should have had the recordings playing too, but I just kind of ran out of time, and I was like, I don't know if I should still do it. And then I'm also having like some work up in the African American Museum in Dallas, and one of my friends asked me to have the work, have the poetry, and then also have the audio like up there. And I haven't used the audio in about like a year, a little over a year. So they were kind of just like parts where I'd asked like the different women that were family members and friends to basically record the poetry and read it themselves. So it's kind of like having it not just like read through the person who's reading it, their voice, but also being able to just connect with the reader because all of the poetry like connected with the person that read it. So it was kind of like I specifically like picked the person that's name is at the bottom to read the certain poem that I felt like they connected to best.
That's awesome. So, like the audio you have at the museum right now.
Yeah, one of my friends, I guess she installed it today too. She put the poetry, like the recordings up because she was like, oh, I kind of want the audio to kind of go with the pieces and to go with the poetry. And I hadn't even like thought about it anymore. But she was like, it would be like a good way to like echo off the work. For a while, like I had it playing up somewhere else and it was just so repetitive that it was like, had it all memorized and
Um, it cut off a little bit in the middle of you talking about the audio that is at the museum at the moment.
yeah, so with the audio, I gave her all 10. So I did about 10 of the poems that were framed and had the women reading them. So she has them up playing right now. So all the poetry kind of connected to the person that read it. So each person, it was kind of like a poem that was not just specifically for them, but something that I kind of resonated with them.
Yeah. And I honestly like even reading the poetry by myself on the wall and then getting to the bottom and seeing that it's to be read in those voices like acts just as powerfully for me because I can picture it just with reading it. And
Hmm.
then, yeah, in several of your hanging works, you chose to hang the pieces all the way down to the floor rather than centering them at eye level. The two works on vinyl, which are Pretty for a Black Girl and You Don't Have to Smile to Be Happy, / You Don't Have to Be Magic to Be a Black Girl, even extend into the floor space from the wall. Prayer Rug as well engages floor space in an interesting way. What was your intention behind these choices?
Yeah, so sometimes I really like, I do a lot of work like hanging work and hanging it at eye level. And so I kind of just, sometimes I kind of just want to like break those rules with galleries, like not having everything at like eye level or where it's like, spaced correctly. So I just feel like it kind of challenges like the work and also challenges how like the viewer sees the work too. So I feel like a lot of ways that I've hung stuff is kind of just ways that I've seen like my grandma's hang stuff and how you would see stuff in like almost like a house or a home. So it's like just natural for the person, not just natural for the viewer.
Yeah, and it's like it's so different and like kind of more interactive, like in the gallery this way. Um, yeah, and then now I'm standing in front of pieces on the other side. So there is there symbolic significance in your choice to use repurposed bed sheets and linens? What connections do you want the viewer to make when seeing these as bases for your assemblage works?
So I started working the piece that's on the bed sheet with the leaves. So I started that one, I guess, like 2 years ago, and that was probably the first piece that I did on linen. And so I started working with the hair, and I was just really, I had worked on the bed sheet with another piece, and then I kind of wanted to connect it with other pieces. So we had started working on something when I was still in college, and so the blood on the sheet is from two other friends that were on their period. So it was just a way to connect like these ideas of like what is being a woman, what is like, having pain, and then ideas of like vengeance. And so it was just, I really kind of connected with like the linens and the materials. And it was something that like I always had a lot of. So it's like an easy, accessible material, and it's also a lighter material. And I felt like it was just something that was, I guess, kind of seen as like maybe a girly material or like feminine material to work with. And so it kind of really contrasted with like ideas of like these materials that weren't so common, or like the hair that's also something that's really feminine in the Black community too.
And yeah, you also make use of glitter and the color pink, amongst other signifiers like the aforementioned. To me, pink is very powerful, energetic, and an even feminine color. And glitter, of course, sparkles and shines. When using glitter and the color pink in your art, what does that embody to you?
I've never really like been a big fan of the color pink, but then it's something that I kind of really connect with. Like when I go to look for like different types of paint or materials, I feel like the pink is just like, it kind of stands out the most. And it's also when I connect with a lot of my pieces about healing and like what is trauma. Like pink was the only color, like a lot of times in like prisons and jails, they use the color pink as like a way to calm like some of the prisoners. So they'll put them in like, the private rooms, and some of the rooms will be pink. So I really kind of connected with that and like what is like a color, like what do colors mean? Like how does the color really affect you when you're going through like, traumatizing spaces and experiences? And I don't know, a lot of materials that are kind of crafty that I work with, like a lot of them are pink too. So it's like you can't really find some that are like brown or, really muted colors. It's more of like, bright pinks and yellows and oranges. And it's just, I guess, just a really happy color too.
Yeah, interesting. And you were also talking about like changing into like making work that makes you happy. You create many works using assemblage. The female Black experience is signified by your use of synthetic hair, bobby pins, curlers, etc., and other items, like works in Lubbock, Texas, and prayer rug. How does this hands-on medium of assemblage relate to the subject of work you're making?
Um, I've always really connected with like found objects and just like random objects. Like I used to be like really big in like painting or drawing, but I felt like the objects that I use or just like any objects are just kind of, they really connect with like the history of what the piece might mean. And so it's kind of just like I've always been interested in like thrift stores and like going shopping at like random places or almost like dumpster diving. So it's just like this idea of like, what did this used to be? Or like also like who owned this item? So I feel like all these objects kind of also have like this energy too. And I guess it just goes into like, I just like to collect stuff and I don't like to throw things away either. So, and I was always connected like to Betty Sayer. She's a really prominent like found object sculptor too. And in her studio, she has like so much stuff. So I guess it's in that same mindset of like all of these objects are really connected to like a certain idea. And it's just like, we can't throw this away. So might as well make art with it.
Everything has a history. I really like that. So tender also is a word that comes to mind when viewing and reading your work. There's an importance on family and kinship within your speaking about the female Black experience. How does that show up in your work?
Yeah, so a lot of the work that I have in the show was really connected with like my mom and my grandma and just like ideas of like what connects family. And so especially with the candles, I had a friend make the candles. And so all of the pictures on there had like pictures of my mom or pictures with my grandma. So I just really wanted to like connect everything that I work with to like some family members. It's almost like a thank you letter. And it's just I've always been like really like interested in like history and like ancestral roots and just kind of like what is our history, because a lot of times in the Black community it's been erased so much, so it's like we have to kind of write our own history and just research in our own ways. So I just really like connecting like, you know, experiences that like my grandma or great grandma might have been through. It's something that I might go through or like my niece might have gone through. So it's just interesting to like go through these objects and then also know that like, you know, we're connected through all of them too.
Yeah, and I think that you definitely draw a lot of influence from your own family, as seen in this work here. Black history and the Black experience, like you said, is an important motif in your work. It's a part of our Black history is a part of our society that is overshadowed, and I'm feeling like you bring attention to its importance when making work about Black history. Where do you draw influence from most? So you kind of answered a little bit, but yeah.
A lot of times now, like I'll draw history from like prominent leaders. A lot of times like people like Angela Davis or Alice Walker. And then it's almost like common people too. Like when I think of my work, I kind of just think of like people who don't really get like their story told, like women that, you know, go through like daily stuff and like their whole life, they don't, you know, get big recognition, but they're still like really important people in life. And because it's one time when I was doing the recordings previously too, and someone was like, oh, well, someone's like a doctor, they could read one of them, like they're a really good reader. And it really wasn't like important to me on how well someone could like read one of the poems or like how important they were. It was like more of like how I was connected to them and like how their story needed to be told too, and just also giving them that space. So it was just kind of like I really connect to the people that like you wouldn't have thought to like have them to read a poem or have them to do a performance. So it's more like the people that, you know, go less recognized.
Yes, absolutely. So, um, Besides the work here, Transfiguration of a Black Girl's Magic, you currently have work entitled Melanated Magic at the Cavill Museum of African American History in Lubbock. What kind of work can we see in this show? And did you have a different experience showing your work in a museum space versus in a gallery space?
Yeah, so the Cavell, they used to always have shows during the first Friday Art Trail in Lubbock, and now they kind of stopped having shows. So when I thought about them, they weren't really like a place that like they have shows, but I didn't see them as more of like a gallery. It was more of like connecting history, and they work with a lot of like Black artists. And also, it's more of an older community that kind of works with them too. So it was a little different experience than having like so many people like under 30 there. But it was really good. And the work that I put there, it's kind of like similar work, but with all that work, I didn't really use like the pinks and the bright colors like that I use in this show. So I was more or less looking at the work that I had created that was like still had the glitter, but was more or less kind of almost had really big of a southern feel, and still the use of cotton and like a lot of uses of wood and just really natural materials. So I use more like dirt and like wasp nests and different items. And it was also kind of just an idea of just kind of connect with what's going on in the community, and just ideas of also being Black, because in that area where the Cavell is, it's East Lubbock also, so it's predominantly Black community. So I just kind of wanted to connect with like this idea of like being in a space that people have kind of pushed you in, and then now it's like they leave you here, and it's like people have these like connotations and stereotypes that like you chose to be here, you've chosen to like live this lifestyle, and everything that's like affected you has been your choice, when essentially like a lot of it isn't. So it's kind of work that really responds to like Lubbock and being in Lubbock, and just also I guess that's my experience in Lubbock too.
Nice. So, yeah, you can see that work now at the African American History Museum in Lubbock, of course. You can see Danielle's work here at Contra Common for one more weekend. It will be on display this upcoming Saturday and Sunday, anytime from 12 p.m. to 6 p.m., with also extended hours on Saturday for a live performance by uncommon people within her work. Um, you can see her at the museum as well as in Wiki How to Run for President, also in Lubbock at the Charles Adams Studio Project Residency. You can follow Danielle on Instagram at Danielle Demetria, as well as following the art house she founded supporting emerging artists and marginalized artists of color called the East Lubbock Art House at East Lubbock Art House. See Danielle's full portfolio on her website, www.danielledemetriaart.com. And we'll post all of these details in the caption of this video. So if you missed that, they'll be written down below. I'd love to know if you have anything else you want to
add. No, just go see some art. I'm excited for the show on this weekend. There's so much going on this weekend too. So if you don't go see my work, just go see some artwork somewhere.
Yes, awesome. So, oh my gosh, thank you so much for showing your work here, first of all, being here to talk with us, and just like making incredible artwork. Thank you.
Thanks.
So, bye, Danielle. Thank you.
Yes, thanks for having me too. This is incredible.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Right.